imagine a broken arm. I mean, an X-ray shows a clean, jagged white line. It's binary, right?
Right, it's very straightforward.
Yeah, it's actually comforting. You point at the screen, put a cast on it, and you know exactly how it heals. But now, imagine trying to X-ray the mind of a grieving 6-year-old.
That's a completely different story.
Exactly. Suddenly, that machine is broken, and you are just staring into the dark. The diagnostic landscape of human neurodevelopment, and especially childhood trauma, is so murky, it's complex, and it's largely invisible to the naked eye.
It really is.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled to have you with us. Today, we're exploring the profoundly complex psychology of childhood grief and trauma, but we are looking at it through a very specific, really fascinating historical lens.
Which is the early childhood of Prophet Muhammad.
Right. And it's just this incredible shortcut to understanding. Today's source material gives us a poignant historical account of his mother's passing when he was just 6 years old.
And beyond just the history, this event perfectly illustrates modern psychological truths. I mean, human neurodevelopment, specifically the mechanics of how a young child's brain processes devastating loss, hasn't really changed.
No, not at all.
So by looking closely at this narrative, we can kind of strip away the academic jargon, right? We can observe the exact raw mechanics of childhood trauma and recovery playing out in real time.
It's fascinating. And to understand why a 6-year-old's brain just sort of short circuits in the face of loss, we have to look at who is anchoring their reality.
The primary caregiver.
Exactly. In the case of Prophet Muhammad, that anchor was his mother, Amin. He was 6 years old, and he had spent the prior year and a half or so living continuously with her.
Which is a deeply critical period of intense emotional bonding.
Yeah. So they embark on this journey to Medina, accompanied by his nanny, Ayman. The trip is meant for family connections, visiting maternal uncles and visiting his father's grave.
And a journey like that, for a child of 6, is an overwhelming flood of new stimuli. I mean, it requires an immense amount of cognitive energy to process new faces, new locations, and altered daily rhythm. During that kind of upheaval, a child relies completely on their primary caregiver to regulate their nervous system.
Like an external hard drive for safety.
That is exactly what it is. The caregiver is their external hard drive.
So they stay in Medina for about a month. Then on the journey back to Mecca, they reach a village called Ebva. And suddenly, his mother falls ill and passes away.
Just a completely devastating event.
Right. And the nanny, Ayman, then has to bring this now motherless 6-year-old boy back to Mecca to his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib.
Yes.
When you strip away the centuries, you are left with a child who just watched his entire world collapse in an unfamiliar village. Why does losing a primary caregiver literally shatter their cognitive world at that specific age?
Well, at 6 years old, your foundational understanding of survival and trust is entirely outsourced.
Outsourced how?
You just don't have the independent means to feed yourself, protect yourself, or maybe most importantly, regulate your own profound fears. So the mother isn't just a loved one, she is the ultimate safe harbor.
Oh, wow. So when that harbor vanishes overnight?
The child is adrift in a physiological storm. And furthermore, a child at this specific stage of cognitive development just lacks the neurological hardware to comprehend death as a complete and irreversible fact.
Because they can't grasp the permanence yet.
Exactly. Abstract concepts like forever simply haven't formed yet in the prefrontal cortex.
So their brain literally cannot process that she's never coming back. It makes me think of a child watching a movie and suddenly the screen just pauses.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right. The image freezes. Because they don't understand the TV is actually broken or the power grid is down. They don't get up and leave the room. They just sit there on the couch waiting for someone to hit play again.
They're essentially trapped in an emotional waiting room. They deeply, truly believe the natural order of their universe will resume.
But that sounds incredibly dangerous for their mental health.
It is the critical danger. Because if the movie is paused and the child's brain cannot accept that the machine is permanently broken, it desperately tries to figure out why the image stopped. The brain demands causality.
Which leads directly into some much darker psychological territory. If the child is demanding a reason for the pause, and they obviously don't understand biology or disease at that age, who do they blame?
Themselves.
Wait, really? Themselves?
Yes, 6-year-olds exist in a state of natural cognitive egocentrism. They believe the world structurally revolves around them.
But not in a selfish way, right?
No, not at all. They don't do this out of selfishness. It's simply how their spatial and logical reasoning is wired at that age. They establish causality around their own actions and thoughts.
Wait, hold on. A 6-year-old knows they didn't physically give their mother a fever, right? They know they didn't magically cause an illness. So how do they logically arrive at, I killed my mom?
Because they don't use adult logic. They use what developmental psychologists call magical thinking.
Magical thinking.
Right. Because they are egocentric, they link completely unrelated thoughts or minor misbehaviors to catastrophic consequences.
Oh, I see.
In the child's mind, the internal monologue sounds something like, I complained about walking too much yesterday, and now she's gone.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Or, I was secretly mad at her this morning, and my anger made her disappear. They invent a logical reason for the sudden absence, and they cast themselves as the villain.
Wow.
This creates an intense, unreal, but incredibly powerful guilt.
A grieving child secretly carrying the belief that they are toxic or literally lethal to the people they love. That feels like it would be completely invisible to an outside observer.
It usually is.
So if a caregiver or a teacher just sees a quiet, sad kid and misses this internal monologue, what happens to that irrational guilt over time?
If left unaddressed, the guilt crystallizes. It hardens from a temporary childhood misconception into a permanent psychological burden.
That sounds like a recipe for lifelong trauma.
It absolutely is. It integrates into their developing personality as a core belief of unworthiness. They grow into adults who subconsciously believe they destroy the things they love, which just sabotages their future relationships and mental health.
So you aren't just comforting a sad child, you are actively having to dismantle an invisible bomb of self-blame.
Exactly, an invisible bomb.
And because a 6-year-old rarely has the vocabulary to pull you aside and say, excuse me, I am experiencing severe egocentric guilt regarding my mother's passing.
Right, they aren't going to say that.
That invisible bomb needs a physical exit route. That hidden psychological pressure inevitably spills over into their physical reality.
The human nervous system requires an outlet. Unprocessed trauma cannot remain abstract. It always becomes physiological.
The historical and psychological records of childhood trauma show a very specific, intense list of symptoms here. We're talking about night terrors, hypervigilance, sudden unexplained startles.
Yes, and behavioral changes too. The child might repeatedly act out the traumatic event during playtime. Or, conversely, they might exhibit complete emotional numbness.
But the symptom that strikes me as the most misunderstood is the sudden regression of previously learned skills.
Oh, absolutely.
Like a 6-year-old who has been fully potty trained for years, suddenly wetting the bed every night.
Regression is where adult interpretation frequently fails the child. The child's subconscious is completely overwhelmed by the present reality.
Right.
So it desperately tries to retreat to an earlier developmental stage like infancy or toddlerhood where they felt totally safe, secure, and cared for.
It's so easy for a stressed, grieving adult to write this off as just being spoiled or acting out.
Which is such a tragic miscommunication.
Yeah, the Turkish texts covering this history beautifully refer to that misconception as şımarıklık, the idea that the child is just being naughty or demanding attention. But if you're an adult organizing a funeral and managing an estate, and suddenly your 6-year-old is throwing a tantrum and wetting the bed, your patience is thin.
Of course. The adult sees defiance. But the child is actually exhibiting a critical survival mechanism. These symptoms are the soul's attempt to protect itself from a reality it cannot digest.
So a child wetting the bed or throwing a sudden crying fit after a trauma is basically like a check engine light flashing on a car dashboard.
I love that analogy, yes.
It isn't the car acting up just to annoy you. It is a critical warning that the internal engine is under immense unseen stress.
And if that check engine light comes on, you don't hit the dashboard with a hammer.
No, you definitely don't.
You don't yell at the car to behave.
Yeah.
You look under the hood to diagnose the hidden pressure.
Right.
When a grieving child exhibits hypervigilance or regresses to bedwetting, their nervous system is flashing red. It is screaming, I am overwhelmed. I am carrying guilt I cannot articulate. I need immediate intervention.
Which brings us to the most important part. How does an adult actually fix the engine? Once parents or even teachers recognize the flashing light for what it is, what is the protocol?
We have to look back at the historical example of the Prophet Muhammad for that. Specifically, his transition into the care of his grandfather, Abdul-Muttalib, once they returned to Mecca.
Because the historical accounts of his emotional recovery provide a highly effective psychological blueprint, right?
They really do. Abdul-Muttalib didn't just passively house his grandson. He provided 3 foundational pillars of support that serve as a timeless guide for anyone, parents, caregivers, teachers supporting a traumatized child today.
Okay, let's explore the mechanics of those pillars. What is the first step in stabilizing the child?
The first pillar is the radical, consistent presence of a reliable adult.
You mentioned earlier that the mother was the safe harbor, so the grandfather is stepping in to rebuild that harbor. But why does it require radical consistency?
Well, think about it. The 6-year-old's worldview just shattered. The absolute most reliable thing in their universe, their mother, vanished without warning.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
So the child's brain naturally assumes that anything and anyone else can vanish at any second, too.
Oh, I see.
The only way to lower their constant, hyper-vigilant panic is through unwavering, predictable presence. The grandfather had to prove that the ground was solid before asking the child to walk on it.
They need to unconsciously recognize, okay, this person is not going to suddenly disappear too.
Exactly. Which moves us to the second pillar, which is allowing the child the freedom to fully express their confusing emotions.
I feel like this is where many well-meaning adults stumble.
Oh, constantly. The instinct is always to soothe the crying child, right? To distract them, or to tell them to be strong or be brave.
I completely understand that instinct, though. If I see a kid crying hysterically, my immediate biological drive is to make the crying stop. It feels like, well, if they are crying, they're suffering, and if I stop the crying, I stop the suffering.
It is a completely natural adult reflex. But neurologically, it is the exact opposite of what the child needs. Yes, when a child experiences sudden trauma, their body is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, the stress hormones. Crying, physical shaking, or even angry outbursts are the body's biological mechanisms for processing and releasing those hormones.
Oh, so shutting down the emotion is like putting a piece of black tape over the check engine light?
Exactly. The engine is still failing. By holding space for the emotional expression, Abdulmuttalib provided a safe container for the grief. He let the biological pressure valve release naturally.
That makes sense. But honestly, that makes the third pillar seem like the most difficult step of all. Because once you've stabilized them and let them cry, you actually have to talk to them.
You do.
The third pillar involves explaining the finality of the situation in a language the child can actually understand. That sounds incredibly daunting.
It is deeply uncomfortable. Adults are terrified of breaking a child's heart, especially when the adults are exhausted by their own grief.
Which is probably why we use so many euphemisms.
Exactly. This fear leads to the widespread use of euphemisms.
Things like, mommy went to sleep, or mommy went on a long trip, or even, mommy is watching you from the sky.
And those euphemisms are profoundly toxic to a traumatized child.
Toxic.
Really? Yes. If we go back to our earlier analogy, telling a child their mother went to sleep just feeds their belief that the movie is only paused.
Oh, wow. Because if she is asleep, she will wake up.
Right. If she went on a trip, she will come back. Euphemisms feed the cognitive distortion. They prevent the child from understanding the permanence of the event, and that keeps them locked in that cycle of waiting and ultimately self-blame.
That is so counterintuitive, but it makes perfect sense. So how do you actually have that conversation? I mean, what are the actual words parents or caregivers use to translate this massive, terrifying reality of death into a concept a 6-year-old can safely digest without totally overwhelming them?
You have to be literal, honest, and developmentally appropriate.
Okay.
You explain the physical reality. You say, her body stopped working. She cannot feel pain anymore, but she cannot come back.
You just have to shatter the movie's paused illusion.
You do. However, and this is the absolute key, you must immediately pair that devastating truth with overwhelming, tangible reassurance of the child's current safety.
So you break the news that the movie is permanently over, but you immediately wrap them in a blanket, hold them tight, and tell them that they are safe and that you are not going anywhere.
Precisely. And you address the magical thinking directly.
How so?
You look them in the eye and you tell them, nothing you said, nothing you thought, and nothing you did caused this. It is not your fault.
Oh, you tackle the invisible guilt bomb head on.
Yes. When you combine these 3 pillars, the absolute consistency of a reliable adult, the open space for biological emotional release, and the honest, comprehensible translation of the event, you create the exact environment a child needs to heal.
They realize, I didn't cause this, I can't reverse this, but I am still safe.
Exactly. It is a timeless blueprint.
The context changes, centuries pass, but the neurological way a young mind processes devastating loss and the exact formula they need to heal from it remains perfectly constant.
The psychology of the human soul is incredibly consistent. The historical account of the Prophet Muhammad's childhood is just one perfectly preserved window into that universal reality.
It's just so powerful. As we wrap up this deep dive, let's kind of pull back and look at the whole picture.
Sure.
We started by understanding that a child's brain lacks the hardware to comprehend permanent absence. They view death as a reversible pause. And because they are cognitively egocentric, they use magical thinking to invent a reason for that pause.
Defaulting to intense, irrational self-blame.
Right. And we saw how that silent guilt manifests physically through right terrors, hypervigilance, and developmental regression.
Like bedwetting. And we learned to view these symptoms not as misbehavior or defiance, but as a biological check engine light signaling deep internal distress.
Finally, we explored the cure. The intervention of a safe adult, a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, who rebuilds the child's reality through radical consistency, permits the biological release of emotion without suppression, and translates the finality of death honestly, shattering the trap of self-blame.
It is a heavy, profoundly complex subject, but understanding these mechanics changes how you view human suffering entirely.
It really does. It gives you a roadmap for compassion rather than frustration.
Absolutely.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over after we sign off. We've spent this entire time dissecting the psychology of 6-year-olds. But I want you to think about the adults you interact with every single day.
That's a great point.
Think about your coworkers, your family members, your friends. Think about the people who have unexplained irrational fears. The people who suffer from sudden anxieties, emotional numbness, or an intense, rigid need to control their environment.
The adults who subconsciously believe they are toxic to the people around them.
Exactly. How many of those adult behaviors are actually just echoes of a flashing check engine light, a light that went off when they were 6 years old, but no safe adult ever noticed, understood, or translated for them?
It's a sobering thought.
How many adults are walking around right now still subconsciously waiting for someone to press play? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the things you think you understand. Keep looking under the hood, and keep exploring the why behind the human experience. We'll catch you next time.